Oh, that limiter sound. That limiter sound. Oh. All right, here we go. You ready? What's up guys, Hobo88 here and welcome back to iRacing, and today is like Christmas came early for us here in Australia if you're an iRacer, because today is the day that Gen 3 Supercars have released on the service, and in this video we're going to go through, check out both the new Chev Camaro and Ford Mustang, put them through their paces and see what they're all about. We're going to kick things right off straight away by checking out the Chev. We're going to load into that first, and then we'll go and check out the Mustang. We will try these cars out in the rain as well in this video, and what I'll do is I will put in timestamps in the description below for you guys just to jump around to what part of the video that you would like to watch if you want to do that, if you don't feel like watching all of it. So head down into the description to find that. But first things first, I guess what we want to do is go ahead and load up a session and see what these things are all about. So firstly, we'll go to test drive. We will select the car, so we want Supercar, and we'll go Gen 3 Chevrolet. We'll go and paint the car first, because I'll show you guys what your different options are here in the paint section. First things first, we want to probably change the color swatch to something. I'm going to go for one of my traditional blue and black sort of schemes. We'll put a couple of sponsors on the car just so you guys can see what that would look like. Let's go with Intel, and why not put, these are my two usual sponsors that I put on these cars. So let's put on SimSpeed TV as well as my other sponsor. So you can see what the sponsor positions look like there on the car by default. And I'll go back up here to the color palette and might swap those around, and then we get actual full color. So let's go down here and look at the different options we've got. We can put our car number in. Colors probably won't matter here, because the only place that your number's going to show up is probably going to be on Windows and things like that. I guess we'll find out when we load in. The wheels, I always go for a matte 1818 black rim, so we'll go for that, and then we'll go and have a look through the different options here with the actual paint itself. So there's a few different presets that come with the cars as default. That's all normal. That's the same for every car that comes out on iRacing. So we'll quickly blast through these and just show you what they all look like, not in any huge great depth. There'll be plenty of time for you guys to go and look through all of these, and these are familiar. I remember this one off the old Supercars. Pretty cool. We'll try and make note of what we like, and because then we'll come back to it. I actually quite like that. That looks cool. But this is one of the things that people sometimes ask about with the new cars, is the different paint options and stuff for them. There's another swirl on the door. I think the one that I liked the most was, even this one was quite cool. And if we apply a few different color schemes to it, you get to see what it looks like. Quite cool. I think I quite like that for now. I like it. So let's save that. That's the car painted. Go back. And we're going to go take it for a run at Phillip Island, and I'll set the weather to defaults for this. We will go out in the dry first before we worry about testing this in the rain. So when we come back, I'll get organised and we'll load her up. Alright, so here we go. We've loaded into a server, and before we get in the car, I do want to go through quickly and show you guys what the garage looks like, just so you can see what the different options are with the cars. Obviously, first things first, there are wet tyres, so we do know these cars can drive in the rain. So We got the option to change the tyres, and then we've got a tyre pressure option. A minimum tyre pressure is what the car starts at here at 138. I imagine that the tyre pressures will probably stay at minimum. We never used tyre pressures in the old supercars. You just ran minimum tyre pressure all the time, everywhere. And the reality is that the softer the tyre, the more grip you'll get out of the tyre. And we see this in real life as well, where cars will run as low a tyre pressure as possible a lot of the time. So I think that that's probably going to be the case. We'll probably see the cars running on minimum tyre pressures all the time. And then underneath the chassis section of the garage is where we get all the rest of our adjustments. So there is a bunch of different things in here that you can choose from and change. If we have a quick look at it by comparison to the old supercars, we've got a front and rear master cylinder option that we can change for the brakes, and then a bias option. That's pretty standard there. A throttle map, so that's interesting, something different. 10 different positions, 6 linear, pedal to demand 1 to 5 are aggressive, less sensitive to low pedal inputs. 7 to 10 are most aggressive, most sensitive to low pressure inputs. So I don't know if we'll mess around with that a lot. I think that'll be like a preference setting that you would end up landing on, and that would be it. You've got your detail page or display page for the dash inside the car as well, so you can set your line locker and launch control. So that's something that we'll have to learn how to do with these cars, and we'll mess around with that over time. Again, a personal preference thing for the starts. Front ARB, so you've got some ARB linkages. So this is the anti-roll bar settings for the cars. First number is push rod hold position, and second number is drop link hold position. So a 1 and 1, 2 and 1, 3 and 1, 3 and 2. So there's a few different options here. The default at the minute is just set to 3 and 1, sort of somewhere in the middle by the look of this. Digressive ARB, sorry, I can't read because my wheel is in the way. Digressive ARB, soften with compression and stiffen with rise as the car's suspension travels. It can help rotate the car into the corner, improve power application off the corner. So linear ARBs remain similar stiffness in both compression and rise. So a bit of adjustment here that we can make with the linkages on the roll bars, the blade angles. So obviously with an ARB, like a roll bar, the more it's sort of like a thin sort of a blade, and if you have it more upright, it's stiffer, and if you have it down flatter, it's obviously softer. So it's essentially your angle adjusts how stiff or soft that the ARBs would be, and then a preload setting as well. Typically your preloads set to around about 0. Then we head into the suspension settings and wheel settings for each corner of the car. So this is pretty much the same as what we saw in the old cars. A spring perch offset basically controls your ride height. Spring rates is your spring stiffness. And then you've got your bump and rebound stiffness, which is a shock adjustment. So there is a little bit less adjustability in the shocks. There are different shocks in the Gen 3 supercars. It's like a control shock across the category. It is a little bit different. And there's a little bit less adjustability here compared to what we saw in the old car. Obviously a camber and a toe in settings. So camber's your wheel camber, toe in and toe out on the front of the car. And then you've got a roll center adjustment on the front as well. So it's let's see what it says here. Roll center is a front suspension geometry construct that affects how the weight transfer occurs while cornering. Higher values allow more weight to transfer across the front of the car relative to the rear. Cause understeer. Lower values allow less weight to transfer across the front of the car, which would create oversteer. So that's a bit of a different adjustment to what we had in the old supercars, but pretty self-explanatory there. And then we head to the rear of the car where we have all the same settings for your perch offsets, your spring rates, and then your bump and rebound stiffness on the shock, camber and toe in. Also have a roll center adjustment here, which is a three slot adjustment, baseline plus 45 and negative 20 mil. And then your droop travel. So this is something else that we haven't really had to worry about in supercars before, but droop travel is a shock tuning parameter that allows the control of tyre loads. Lower droop travel remaining will allow for faster inside wheel pickup when a shock is in extension. This can be used to help control rotation on entry or middle corners to overcome this inherent understeer caused by the car's lock differential. So that's a new setting for us to work with. We'll have to learn a little bit about how that controls the car and how that affects the handling. But That's something different in this car. Then we've obviously got fuel, so I'm just going to go all the way here and show you guys that this car actually has a 133 litre tank, so a bit larger than what we're used to. I don't know what it's set to by default here, but it is a larger tank than what we're used to, which means we'll see longer fuel runs in this car. Our drop gear ratio, which is obviously just the gearbox rear end ratio. And then for the rear ARB, we have the same as earlier with the blade angle, which we control to essentially change the stiffness of the rear ARB. So that's it. I want to go through that. This will be the same for both of the cars, the Ford and the Holden. What I will do here is I will quickly save Phillip Island, Chev. It is just the default set, but I'll save that and I'll load this into the Mustang when we bring the Mustang out, just to confirm that the two cars share setups, which I imagine will be the case, but something hasn't been confirmed yet. And yeah, make sure that we can share setups across the two cars. We should be able to, like we used to in the old cars, shouldn't be a problem. All right, the part we've all been waiting for. Let's get in the car and load it in and fire it up for the first time. The one part that I've been looking forward to the most. So here we go in our Chevy Camaro. Let's see if I've got all my buttons and everything set. I do, so ignition is on. Here we go. Need to probably turn it up. Hopefully that's loud enough for you guys to hear. That sounds so good. How aggressive is the idle? That is very, very throaty. What I'll do real quick is I'll go into my settings and turn it up. So get ready. This might be loud. Sound. Can I do this? Engines, negative 15. Oh, how loud do I want to make it? Let's go there. Ready? Here we go. Oh. Oh, wow, you guys. All right. I'm not going to drive it like that because it'll deafen me. We go back into the sound. I set it at negative 15 before. I think we need it just a little bit louder though, don't we? Just a little bit. Let's go negative 13. All right. Let's go out on track. Oh, that was the one thing we didn't do first, is just check with the garage, because it does have a Phillip Island default set. So there is already a series of baseline setups for all different tracks, which I thought this was interesting, because I noticed when I first loaded in, it said Phillip Island was loaded. So there is a pre-made setup from iRacing for a whole host of the tracks. And these would no doubt be based on the tracks that they're going to have on their official schedules and things like that. So, and there is also a wet setup. So that's really interesting to me. Normally, in the past, I think we've only just had a baseline setup. So very interesting. All right. Oh, that limiter sound. That limiter sound. Oh. All right, here we go. You ready? So we're expecting these cars to drive differently. The theory is the same as the old supercars, but there are quite a few changes to the new cars. And I hope you can even hear me, because it is very, very loud. Oh! Oh yeah, alright. So, let's talk a little bit about the fundamental changes with this car compared to what we'd seen in the supercar years gone by. So, Gen 3, whoa, too deep at turn 1. Gen 3 supercars, the fundamentals behind the change were the cars were designed to be made to look more like their road-going counterparts. So we saw with the Gen 2 supercars how much the particularly the Mustang looked kind of like a Frankenstein of a car, because it was nothing like the road-going version of the Mustang, and it was designed that way because it had to fit around the space frame and within the rule book for what the car had to be. But these were designed very much more so to look like the actual road-going cars. So first and foremost, they were designed for an aesthetic change, but they also had a couple of other fundamental things. One of them was the idea that it would be cheaper. I don't actually know whether or not that turned out to be the case, but they were meant to be cheaper to build and operate, maintain. But when you talk about the different things to the cars in regards to what makes them different to drive, probably the biggest thing was the change to the aero. So there is a significantly lower amount of aero on these cars compared to what we saw in the Gen 2 supercars. They produce, I forget what it is now, it was something like 50% or more less downforce than the old cars or something like that. It was a huge difference. And you saw me go down to turn 1 on the last lap and the car just had no grip. It wouldn't stop and turn and stick to the road like the old cars would. Through here I'm noticing it as well. If I try and hold this flat, there's no way. It's all understeer. Which, I mean, it was never an easy corner to go through flat out in the old car, but it was certainly possible. So at high speeds, the cars don't have the same amount of turn because the front of the car, the nose of the car, isn't producing anywhere near as much downforce. Now, the other part to that is that the rear end of the car doesn't produce anywhere near as much downforce either, so they are fairly slippery cars by comparison to the old ones, but they do generate a lot of mechanical grip. So you can see when I'm trying to put the power down, there's certainly I would say a lot less grip on the throttle application as well.
35.518. That's a great map, Ever. Keep it up.
Which is what the car's supposed to be like. So that's accurate. Certainly, like it should be for a supercar, very difficult to get the power down. So I'm just going to try and throttle up to the edge of the power a little bit here. Get a little bit of wheel spin happening. Because one of the things I'm really interested in, and one of the things I really didn't like about the old cars, was like I don't really know how to describe it, but like the edge of limit, or the grip limit, driving right up against that in the old cars felt really horrible. Because you'd get this thing where you drive right up near the limit, and as soon as you press too hard, the car would kill you. It would oversteer. So I just want to try and slide the car a little bit.
35.675.
Certainly the characteristics of the cars at high speed is a lot more understeer than what I'm used to. Now this will be the longest section of the video as well, this first impression. I won't spend this long in the cars every time. So obviously sliding the cars is not the fast way to drive them, but I'm curious really about how they feel when they're against the limit. And I think that it's mostly the tyre, like I'd say it's mostly the tyre. Like the old car, it always just felt like the tyre model was a little bit broken when you try and get the car right up against the limit of the grip, and it feels, to me, a lot nicer in this car at the minute, which is something I'm really pleased about. So we'll go back and we'll watch a couple of laps of the replay there.
That's your mark now. Turn in, turn in.
But overall, it feels like the tyre's a lot nicer. Let's go TV1 laps and we'll go back and watch. This is the fastest lap, so let's watch this one. And have a quick look at this car on the track. It looks really, really nice. I love the look of the new Gen 3 supercars. A lot of people complain about them for a lot of different reasons, but the one thing, or two things you cannot complain about for me,
go, man, go, 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 go,
is
road speed all
the
the way
look
down.
and the sound. You can see there, that was where I was trying to drive flat through that corner and it just understeered. Wasn't gonna happen. So what I noticed is that the power down exit of the slow corners, the car really tries to burst into wheel spin. Like it feels like it's a really torquey motor. So it's still going to be very difficult to drive off of the slow corners in that regard. But in the faster corners, the car feels like the tyre is really quite nice. Grips into the road really well and feels nice. And trying to drive off the corners, it feels a little bit, I wouldn't say forgiving, but that's kind of what I want to say by comparison to the Gen 2 car. Oh, that limiter sound. Holy moly. This might be the best sounding car on the sim so far. I mean, I'm probably biased, but the only thing that comes close to it would be the late model. Alright. First impression, I really, really like it. It feels really good, looks really good, sounds really good. What we'll do next is we will reload into a different track and we'll check out the Mustang. Alright, here we go guys, same as before. We're going to go through quickly and take a look at the different options available for the Mustang. Be much the same here, pretty much the same deal as what we saw before. We'll go through and I'll just put some colours on here. I think we want it to probably be that way. Yeah, even there might be better, just to show you guys what it looks like. Overall, that's what the body of the car looks like. Really, really nice. I actually think the Mustang looks unreal in the Gen 3 cars. I think it really does. You guys know that I'm a lifelong Holden man, but the Mustang looks good. Let's go with the same sponsors as we put on the car before, just to show you what they look like. By comparison, much smaller. It looks like door logo here for the primary sponsor slot. Of course, not too many people use the default paints. Anyway, but to give you some idea, the door looks a lot smaller. Big bonnet, big hood bonnet logo. Really nice. Alright, let's go down preferred car number. And interestingly, you don't even get the option to change the colors of the number here in the builder for this car, but I think we did for the Chev, although they don't do anything, so that's interesting. And then the wheels, we're going to go matte, same as before. Default color that I use for the supercars more often than not, 181818 matte. And that looks pretty cool. So let's just go through quickly and quickly look through all the different options like we did for the Chev. Again, the reality is that we won't see that many of these being used once people get their paints and stuff sorted. Like trading paints is definitely the more popular way to go. That's a very Mustang looking paint there with the scallop on the door. But either way, it's still cool to see what these things look like with a bunch of different patterns and designs and things on them. A couple that are very similar to what we saw on the other car, and then a couple that are very, very different. This is giving me like FPR, Ford Performance Racing type. Like things like the eagle on the back here, and there you go. Again, some of them look good, some of them don't. I quite like that. I think that's similar to what we used on the other car. Yeah, that's cool. All right, well, let's just go back to this one. I think that's the one that I like the most. Quickly have a look at some different colors. Very bright yellow. It's your traditional iRacing color patterns. I think this was the color set that we used before, same sort of design. So let's save that. We're going to go ahead and load this time in at a different track. I think we don't want to do the same track all the time, so we'll go with Sandown for this one. I'm going to leave the weather the same as before, completely static, and iRacing default weather just to test it, so we get an apples to apples for that. And yeah, we'll load in the track here, and once we're loaded in, I'll come back and we'll go through it all again. All right, so welcome to Sandown. I'm just going to go through quickly. We're not going to go through too much here in the garage because all of this stuff is going to be exactly the same as what we saw on the other car. These cars are the same. And proof of that, we'll check, is if we go to my setups, you can see that I can now load and pass that same setup that we had saved before in the Chev here in the Mustang. So that means that that works fine. As we always have had, we can share setups between the two cars. And that is because fundamentally they are the same. Slightly different motors, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if I just go back in here to the iRacing setups and we are at Sandown, there will be a default set for here. So I'm not going to go through all this stuff again. It's all the same as earlier. I talked about it for the Chev. Otherwise, we will go in here quickly and change the sounds again. So sounds, and if we go, I think we went negative 5 or something. Load in, get ready.
Now we need to get those fuel numbers so we can see where we're at there. All right, let's get after it.
Definitely sounds different. Definitely sounds different. So let's go back in here and adjust our sound volume back. Otherwise I'll get deafened. Or go to 13, the same as we had it for the other car. It's quite loud, but I mean, they sound awesome, so. But definitely a different sound. Definitely a different sound. So, we're at Sandown this time. It is a slightly different track. That same sort of limiter sound. We're going to learn a little bit about curb strikes here. Let's take it very easy initially. Yeah, for sure. This confirms what I was talking about before, where the power delivery off of the low speed corners is really, really going to be where you gain and lose time, I think, in this car. again there. Yeah, so what it's done here so far, I've only done one lap, but I can already tell you that it reinforces what I was feeling from when we're doing laps at Phillip Island, is that, the low speed traction zone stuff. Ooh, that's a big brake lock. Big brake lock, big brake lock. Not even close to stopping. The low speed traction zones are definitely going to be tricky. For sure, the car wants to burst into wheel spin, so you've got to be really careful on the throttle control when you're coming off of the slow speed corners. And the high speed understeer is the other thing that's really prevalent. And I mean, we are on the iRacing default set, so you might be able to tune some of this stuff out, but like, I'm going much, much slower through there and fighting the understeer compared to like the old car. You could really fly through those corners in the old car. It would produce a lot of downforce, and it's just not there. Even there, like, that's a fairly slow corner, and I'm having to get a lot more out of it to make the corners. So braking probably a little bit earlier. Let's try and not melt the tyres. But what we do get to test here that we haven't been able to test so far at Phillip Island is the way that the car handles the curbs, which is one of the other pet peeves that I had in the old car. Was I hated driving it at tracks like Belle Isle or on street circuits, because the way that it handled the bumps was just horrific. Curb strikes, really not very nice. The car was really, really wild, and it didn't feel good. Like, it felt, I don't know, like horrible. It would fly off the curbs, and when it bounced and landed on the ground, it wouldn't settle. You couldn't put, your foot down. You couldn't get back into the power at all. And it just didn't feel nice. Like, these cars are designed to be able to smash curbs in real life. Like, that's one of the things we love about them, is that they attack curbs in them, and like, I cannot understate how much nicer these things feel on the curbs here than the old car. Like, it was almost impossible to drive across that chicane near at turns 2 and 3 in the old car. But in this, it's just comfortable. Like, it feels really nice. So I get really excited about the prospect of somewhere like Adelaide being able to hit the centre chicane there and drive through it, and it's going to feel good, like a supercar should. Now, the sound. So the sound in this car is different. Love it or hate it, it's personal opinion, I guess. I think this thing sounds unreal, but it isn't anywhere near as throaty or as talky sounding as the Chev, in my opinion. It's definitely got a bit more of a whiny sort of sound to it, but the motors are different in the two cars, so they should sound different. And I'm not an engineer or a mechanically inclined person, so I can't really explain the differences between the two motors all that well. This has got like a Coyote motor in it. They put out about 600 horsepower. Cars weigh, I think it's 1,350 kilos or thereabouts. So the power to weight is still definitely there. It's right up there. But the Chev and the Ford do have different motors, and their power curve very meticulously has been tuned to be the same, even though the power output's a little bit different. But that is why you get a different sound. However, performance-wise, the two cars should be exactly the same. And being in the sim, the parity thing shouldn't be an issue, because they should, in theory, just be the same physics on both the cars, even though they sound a little bit different. Unlike real life, where they do have to work on tuning them to make sure that the parity's the same, we shouldn't have that issue here in the sim. And I imagine that even though the cars are a slightly different shape and body-wise, things like that, just like in the past on the sim, the two cars should have the exact same physics, so there shouldn't be any issue with aero balance and parity and stuff like that. So let me know, guys, in the comments, what do you think? Which one sounds better?
Back it down. Back it down.
What we'll do is we'll pull over here and have a listen to it on the outside as well, because the exterior sounds will be a little bit different also. So let's do that and have a listen. We'll go laps. Ooh. Ooh. Oh, wow. All right. So I've made up my mind. I think that the Camaro sounds better in car and the Mustang sounds better on the exterior. That's what I've decided. Certainly a lot more of that whiny sound in the Mustang, and it's not anywhere near as throaty as the Chev, but when it gets right up in the rev range, and it's flying past, listen to that thing. Listen to it. Oh. All right, yeah, that's where I've landed. I think that the Mustang sounds better on the exterior shots. Camaro sounds better in the in-car. So there you go. That's the two cars. Just a brief look at them both, and my initial impressions about them for how they drive. The other thing that you guys are going to want to see is what they look like in the wet. So what I will do is I'm going to load back in to the Chev, which will be the car that I will drive predominantly here on the sim, I think. And we'll load it up in the wet at Winton, and we'll go and do a few laps around in the rain, see how it handles that. Alright guys, here we go. We're at Winton. It is wet, and I have loaded in an AI session for this because I think it's cool to have the other cars out on track when we're driving around in the wet. I'm going to go into the garage here. I'm going to go to my setups. There should be one for Winton, but there should also be one for wet. So I think what I'll do is I'll load the wet set. First I might do the Winton one and get the rear end ratio setting. So 1.072 is the drop gear ratio. So we'll go back in here, go to the wet set. Just assign the same rear end ratio there, drop gear ratio. So be forewarned that I'm going to be terrible.
We need to get those fuel numbers, guys, so we can see where we're at there.
I've never driven
Let's roll.
really in the wet hardly at all, so I know I'm not going to be any good at this, but we'll go out and we'll see if we can survive, stay on the track. The track is set to fairly wet, so it's moderate as well, so it's not just lightly wet, it is quite wet. But it's also not set to heavy wet or anything like that. I have got the AI set to like 110 to 125% difficulty. I found in the old car, if I was ever using the AI to test with for stuff, that if I had them set at the highest difficulty, they were, or you know, up there, a little bit of variation. That's why I've got the variation, but right up at the hardest difficulty, that was sort of somewhere close to where I needed them to be as a gauge for testing. And I can't give you the exact details, but I seem to recall reading something somewhere about there being a bug with the car at launch with like dry to wet sessions not working properly, where if you went from a dry tyre to a wet tyre, you couldn't. Oh no, it didn't even go close. If you go from dry to a wet tyre, that it wouldn't change correctly. So I don't know if that's an issue or not. That's something that the iRacing staff said that they were working on. I have to say at the minute that there's a lot more grip than I thought there'd be.
0.098.
Nope. I take back what I said. What I mean to say is that they're a lot more drivable than I thought they'd be. In fact,
The 26 is the fastest car on the racetrack. 32.309.
it doesn't even seem like you can't drive. Like, I've been trying to drive around the main line, but actually feels like there's decent grip on the normal racing line. Because my very limited experience in the rain is that you basically just don't want to do it.
.57. Great lap.
Okay, this is actually really interesting. So, the sort of grip level that I've got here at the minute is what I expected the wet to be like when it first came out. But my experience has been that there's just no grip in the rain, typically. Granted, I've done one GT race
Is the fastest car on the
in the
racetrack.
wet
32.183.
and one Formula Ford race in the wet, I think, and that's about it. So I don't have much exposure to it, but like it's slippery, but nowhere near as bad as I thought it would be. So I don't know if they've like nerfed this because supercars in the wet
There you go, buddy. That was a good lap.
sounds kind of
you doing
undrivable.
The 47 is the fastest car on the racetrack. 31.859.
Well, I keep expecting to have less grip than I've got. Because I was pretty nervous that driving in the rain in these cars would be basically impossible. But if it's like this, I'm actually kind of looking forward to it.
Damn, dude, that was the fastest lap we run in a while.
Well, the lines are still slippery, but...
Those are the lap times we need, man. Keep digging.
Like, to give you some idea, sorry, I haven't been talking because I've been concentrating. Like, I expected that you would not be able to use full throttle in these cars in the wet. Anywhere, ever. But in reality, they're the most comfortable of all the cars I've ever driven in the wet, which, like I said, is not much, but... I was expecting it to be very, very hard.
The 30 is the fastest car on the track. 31.806. Damn, dude, that was the fastest lap we run in a while. The 30 is the fastest car on the track there. 31.738. On your left. Still there.
Nope. Alright. I think that's probably enough. You guys have seen it. You've seen that I haven't died. And, I mean, of all the things that surprised me, thing that surprised me the most was how easy they are to drive in the wet. And I say easy, that's relative. They're not easy to drive, but I thought that they would be impossible to drive in the wet. And I'm pleasantly surprised by that, to be perfectly honest.
Good job, fellas. You are 10 away now.
Let's go check out some of the replay. I'll give my last thoughts about them before we wrap up the video. But overall, I guess I was expecting the worst. I was expecting them to be... I was expecting them to be hard to drive or not really that enjoyable to drive. You know, like, they're supercars, you kind of expect them to be difficult to drive. That's how they are, but I was worried that they wouldn't be fun to drive.
Go. Hard.
Is probably more what I was concerned about. And I couldn't be more wrong. Like, everything that I'd hoped would be the case is the case. Like, I was hoping that they'd be fun. I was hoping they'd be challenging, but I was hoping... the thing I was really hoping was that the tyre would feel nice, because I was worried that, like I said before, the grip limit would be really awkward in them, and they'd feel like... I don't know how else to explain it, but the old cars were kind of felt, to me, a little bit like rigid, like they were on a knife edge when they were on the limit, and the difference is that up to the limit they felt good, and then as soon as you got to the limit they felt unrealistic and exaggerated in how they handled that. Whereas I feel like these cars, the best way to describe it is they feel like softer, like around the edges. They're not so brutal against the edge of the limit, and that's the one thing that I was really worried about with these cars. I think that they feel very balanced. You're certainly going to have to relearn a little bit about how we drive them with technique and stuff. That's to do with how they are fundamentally different with the older cars, which is to be expected. Like, you know, that's exactly what we thought would be the case. For sure, they understeer a lot more at high speed, and trying to get on the power at low speed is difficult. And I mean, that's what we expected them to be, and that's what supercars should be. They should be hard to drive. So I'm really, really pleased. My first impression is that I really, really like them. There's a certain amount of recency bias, I'm sure, with that, because they're the new thing that we've all been waiting for years and years. So, you know, maybe in time I'll start to grow a little bit more unhappy with certain elements of them. But at the moment, I can't really fault anything. I was expecting to have a lot of negative feedback on different parts about this, but if I'm honest, I can't really complain too much about anything, which I'm really surprised about. So, and happy, obviously really happy about as well. So, you know, let me know, guys, in the comments below, what do you think of these cars? What are your thoughts, feedback, either from just watching my video or from being out on track and driving them yourself? I'd be really keen to get your all thoughts on what you think of them. But overall, I'm really pleased. So, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been really, really fun. It's something we've been looking forward to for a long, long time. Yeah, like the video if you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you think. And that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.